Welcome to Expert Table Talks, a series of the European Blind Union, brought to you by the EBU Braille Working Group.
Hello everyone, welcome on the fourth and final session of our Expert Table Talks on Braille Displays. This series has been prepared by Braille Working Group of European Blind Union, and it's part of our work to support effective and confident using of Braille displays. In previous three sessions, we touched on 3 C's that stands for connecting the Braille display to your devices, consuming the information, and controlling your devices with the Braille display. This fourth session is going to be about creating content with the Braille display. It means that we are going to speak about different factors or different features of Braille display, and also about the files you can create. What does it mean? How to make them readable on your devices? And we believe this is going to be a good and informative session, which will close nicely our table talk. Let me speak a bit about Living Braille portal, because this is a very important resource here in Europe, but it seems that we are reaching out to the world as well. For that, we thank everyone who is contributing to Living Braille. It's a portal of European Blind Union, and the website is livingbraille.eu. And everybody here, or everybody who will listen and watch this recording on a YouTube channel, is very welcome to register to Living Braille and contribute with his own or her own experience and Braille information you would like to share. So if you want to register, just write an email to team@livingbraille.eu, and we will take it further and register you. And then after this, you are very welcome to log in and post whatever Braille-related content you would like to. If we speak about creating content, first thing we should consider is Braille display itself, the device as it stands, how we can use it to create a content. For that, we can speak, of course, about inputs in a Braille display. And for this, we have a first panelist, first speaker here, Oleg Shevkun. Welcome, Oleg. And tell us about Braille displays and creating content with them as devices.
Hello, Michal, and hello, everyone. So I think I'd like to raise a few points, but also ask a few questions so you may answer in the chat. And then our moderators, I think later in the session or whenever the moderators decide to do so, we will have an open floor to discuss some of those issues, because there are issues to which I don't know the answer. I see several approaches of doing things, but I don't know what the best approach is, and even how to choose the path to follow. Well, but let me share a few things that are pretty obvious here first. Well, when we input text into any device, we can use voice input, of course, but we can use the keyboard also. And for Braille displays, we'll be using the keyboard. There are two main types of keyboards on the Braille display, and the choice of that really depends on the user. There are devices with QWERTY keyboard on the Braille display. There are devices with the Perkins Braille keyboard, and there is a German device that has both. So you can kind of flip that keyboard around, and it may be either QWERTY or a Perkins. Now, the beauty of the QWERTY Braille keyboard is that if you're already familiar with computer keyboard, as most people are, then that's what you want to use, but that takes up more space. And there are some countries, and there are some environments, I should say, where the keyboard you're learning to use first and foremost is going to be the QWERTY Braille keyboard. So in that case, mostly, there will be some exceptions, but mostly the input is not going to be much different from the input on the computer, so we're not going to spend much time there unless you want to raise issues in chat and unless you want to concentrate on something that we omit. I'm much more interested right now in the so-called Perkins Braille keyboard, and that's named after the Perkins Braille writer. And I think the reason why it's named Perkins keyboard is because Americans thought of it or patented it or so on. As far as I'm concerned, if it were done in Germany, it could be called a Picht Braille keyboard, because the Braille writers here are Picht typewriters. But, well, Perkins, after the school and after the typewriter, let that be. There are a couple of issues there to be aware of concerning the Perkins keyboard. Number one, is that a 6-dot keyboard? So we have dots 1 through 6 plus the space bar, or an 8-dot keyboard? Why does that matter? Most displays will have an 8-dot keyboard, of course, but dots 7 and 8 sort of serve as an addition, and you may run into some interesting decisions that Braille display manufacturers make. Now, in non-English countries, or in most non-English countries, dots 7 and 8 are meaningful for producing Braille characters. So you will have an 8-dot Braille table, and you may have letter A, that would be dot 1, but dots 1-8 will enter another Braille character, or dots 1-7-8 will enter something else. And you can thus map the characters to different alphabets. Like, for example, in the Russian or Cyrillic Braille tables, which I'm very familiar with, your A would be like a Russian A or Cyrillic A, or with dots 7, that would be capitalized, as of course in English-speaking countries as well. You add dot 7 for a character, and you add dot 8 for representing an alternative alphabet. So like A, dot 1 from, say, Cyrillic alphabet, or dots 1-8 from the Latin alphabet. And I've seen tables where it's done the other way around. You have dot 1 for A English or Latin, dot 1-8 for Cyrillic. So the first thing you need to know, and we'll get to that in a later part of the session, is what Braille table you're using and how specifically you're supposed to be writing those characters. That's outside the scope of my presentation today. What matters, though, for the keyboard is some Braille display manufacturers, for some reasons, have decided that your keyboard should be 6 dots. And dots 7 and 8 could be used as like control characters or service characters or special characters. Like, for example, F with dot 8, for example, would do the find function, not F with space, but with dot 8. And they would reuse those dots 7 and 8. And even if you wanted to do a capital, you would press like something like U with space bar followed by the letter that you want to capitalize. So one manufacturer that's known to do this in the English locale is HIMS. So one question that you have to ask and that you have to figure out for a Braille display or for the screen reader or for the Braille table is how those dots 7 or 8 are used. And I don't think there's something called the best option. Some of us would want, for example, and I would be one of those people, we would want dot 8 to be used as enter key and dot 7 as backspace. But in some tables or in some Braille displays, they could be also assigned to specific characters. So the first thing to do is do not make assumptions. Read your Braille display manual. Read your screen reader manual. And you may be surprised, to put it mildly, to figure out how those dots, how those keys are used. There may be a Braille displays, and there are Braille displays, and I'm intentionally not mentioning the names, the specific names of the Braille display or brands of the Braille displays, but there will be Braille displays that have 2 space bars. And then the question is, are those 2 space bars identical? Or do they have different functions? I was told by somebody who is pretty knowledgeable that in some circumstances it is cheaper for a Braille display manufacturer to have two space bars than to put in one key that would be like a longer or a double key, a longer space bar, and that would work reliably. It may be true, it may not be true. I'm just passing what somebody told me about it. But the reality for us is, again, like on a computer, on a regular computer, you see the keyboard. Yes, you may have questions like, okay, is there just one control key or two control keys? And like on smaller keyboards, you may wonder if there are function keys and so on. But generally, computer keyboards are similar. The Perkins keyboards are somewhat similar, but you have to ask, okay, dots 7 and 8, where are they located? What do they do on that Braille display in that locale with that specific table? The space bar, what does that do? If there are two space bars, what do they do? So that's where reading manual for the Braille display comes in really handy. Just don't make assumptions. It is also interesting and worth mentioning that the functioning of our keys may be different depending on what localization you're using. So the same Braille display, you may have the function of dot 7 or 8 character forming keys. So you use them within characters in one locale, and then you switch to another locale, and now they're suddenly used as command keys or part of the command set. Again, we can go into specific Braille displays, but I think the best thing is to realize that this is where the differences may be, and that's where you need to know exactly how your specific Braille display works. The next thing is the feel of the Braille keyboard, and that's really subjective. I mean, it's like with any computer keyboard, and I've seen people, unfortunately, who said, okay, I've tried a Perkins Braille keyboard and I didn't like it. And it turns out that the person tried it on one display only. They would say it's too loud or it's too mushy. It doesn't respond the way I would like it to. So whenever you go to a place where you can see multiple Braille displays, go ahead and try the feel of the keyboard, even with the Braille display turned off. If you have a chance to be at Sight City here in Germany, or Sight Village in the UK, or CSUN and so on, you might want to just go ahead and you can even turn the display off and type on the keyboard. If it's a smaller Braille display, you may see that the keys are too close together. That's not what you would like. Or you may see that they're too soft or too hard. And just try several units from different manufacturers, from different developers to see if that's what you need. Now, when we start writing, it really, and again, I'm avoiding mentioning different Braille displays, but you will be noticing, if you're an experienced user of Perkins Braille keyboards, you will be interested, for example, in finding out things like, okay, when do the dots register? When I press them or when I release them? Why is that important? Well, for example, you wanted to write a P, the letter P, but you were not careful enough and you wrote an L. And you're holding your three fingers on the dots of the letter L. You have dot 1, dot 2, and dot 3. Question. And that's a question which you can research when you're getting familiar with your display. If I realized that needs to be a P, not an L, can I just be holding dots 1, 2, 3 and press dot 4 and release them all at the same time then? Will that give me a P? Will that be a letter I want to see? Or will that still be an L because dot 4 is not going to register since I already started the sequence, okay? Since I already have 3 dots pressed. Why is that going to be important? Well, because then we're developing our techniques, of writing Braille, of correcting our own mistakes. Or, for example, the space bar. Is that located in a way that I can easily use it? Like I can use my thumb on my left hand or my right hand. Is it easy for me to reach? Is that in the easy reach for me? Again, that's where you get familiar with the keyboard. And then, for those of us who are experienced Braille writers, there's also a catch there, because we want to write fast. And then the fun begins, because you start using a new Braille display and you suddenly find out that your Braille is not of the quality you expected that to be. There are missing characters, or missing dots, or extra dots, or even worse, you discover that your Braille display is doing unintended things, like you type a dog, you won't say a dog, a space dog, but for some odd reason, you notice that after you typed A, your Braille display jumped to the previous line. And the letters of the word dog are in the place where they should not have been. So why? Well, that's the Braille keyboard issue or our accuracy issue. If we read the manuals of the Braille display, we know that Braille letters pressed together with space bar will produce commands. And on most Braille displays, dot 1 with space bar will move us to previous line. Dot 4 with space bar will move us to next line. Dots 1, 2, 3 with space bar, so it's letter L with space bar, will move us to the beginning of the document. Now, what happens if I write small and I do not quite release all of the dots of the letter L completely and I press space bar? Well, that character may well be registered as dots 1, 2, 3 chord, or 1, 2, 3 with space bar. And that suddenly moves me to the top of file. How do I know if that's my Braille display keyboard acting up or if I'm careless? My usual technique of researching this with a new Braille display is start slowly but rhythmically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you write characters and you make it faster. You don't specifically speed. You try to keep the rhythm of writing. And you make sure that you write carefully, especially with the new Braille keyboard. Now, there are circumstances, specifically when connecting a Braille display to a screen reader, when you will say, hey, I'm writing slowly enough, but my input is butchered already. On the other hand, that discipline of slower typing and then increasing the speed gradually will help us to diagnose potential issues. And there are Braille displays, and I know only one manufacturer that has that, which allow you to get into the mode where the space bar with a character will not activate a command just because of this issue of the possibility to activate an unintended command and to get unintended results. By the way, we mentioned earlier the situation where you're pressing a key and you're not releasing it and you're pressing something else. That also may be a reason for incorrect characters or incorrect input. For example, I write two letters PR. I have not quite released all the dots from the P. But the way the display works is that it registers the input only after all the dots are released. So not all of the dots from the P have been released, and I'm pressing R. The result is going to be the letter Q. Why? Well, because I have dots 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a P, and they have not been completely released, and I'm intending to press R, but what I'm actually doing is I'm pressing 1, 2, 3, 5, so the dots are added, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what I'm getting at here is Yes, you can say, okay, I may be a bad typist, or you may say it's a bad keyboard, but it may turn out to be that this is how the Braille keyboard is set, that this is how it works, and this is how it's configured. So for Braille display manufacturers, and actually for screen reader manufacturers, this is one of the pain points, a fast Braille list. And I've heard responses, oh, like you're Brailling too fast. We cannot support this. And I don't think we should. I mean, what if a sighted person was told by a keyboard manufacturer, you're too fast of a typist, so we're not supporting you. Get to the bottom of it. Some of us say, okay, I'm using a Perkins typewriter, and it's one thing, and I'm using the Braille display. I'm not that accurate with the Braille display. Slow down and increase the speed gradually. And finally, for those of us, and there are very few of us, who are transitioning to a Braille display, especially from the Perkins Braille writer, the strength or the force of hitting that keyboard or hitting those keys really needs to be decreased. Somebody said, actually a young guy was trying to make a compliment to a young woman, and he said something that I really, really loved. He said, your fingers are dancing on that Braille keyboard. And this is absolutely lovely. It's with grace, it's with a light touch, and it's with good understanding of what exactly you want to do. And my wish for all of us is A, that we would find a good keyboard to dance on. B, that we would develop the dancing feel for the keyboard. And C, that even the fastest dance would be within our reach, where we know our Braille display and we know how to take notes and we know how to make the best of the technology we have. So that's a quick look into the Perkins Braille keyboard and the main issues we can come across here. And I don't know, Michal, we take questions afterwards, right?
Yes, we will take questions then
Or
after
comments.
after we have heard from all the others. Thank you, Oleg, for wonderful presentation. I was thinking all the time about things you are saying, and the punchline was very, very nice. Thank you. Now we will move on our discussion to another feature or another part of creating the content on a Braille display. We have two panelists, Connor Scott Gartner and James Bowden, here. Welcome, both of you. If we speak about creating files, I have a feeling that sometimes it's kind of an adventure. So unveil this adventure for us, please, and let's talk about a bit the digital environment and the files we create.
Hey everyone, this is Connor, and I'm going to start by talking about file creation, and then James will take over to talk about complicated file creation, because that's how this is going to work. So, as Oleg said, you've got different types of Braille displays, and really by that I mean different types of keyboards, but you've also got the choice between a display only, maybe with some standalone features, and a note taker, and they tend to be more feature rich than just a Braille display. But we're going to assume for now that your Braille display has some capacity for standalone features. I know there are Braille displays that you can just connect to a PC, but we're going to assume that you can create an element of Word documents of some variety on your display. So all of these differences, though, will influence how you create documents, the kinds of documents you can create, and then what you can do with them. So different Braille displays may be able to open and create different types of files. And this is a really important distinction, because your Braille display might be able to open something like a set of PowerPoint slides even, or a Word document, but can you edit that file and save it in the same format? And can you create one of these files? And these are definitely considerations when you're thinking about the kinds of files you're creating and what you're going to do with them. Many Braille displays will only create text files, if we're talking about printed files that you can then immediately transfer to your computer and access. And that's something you need to think about because you need to decide what file type will work for the kinds of documents you're creating. With a text file, the limitation is really formatting. You can create this text file, you can write all of your text in it, and you can think, okay, perfect, I've written all my notes, but actually, there's no formatting here. It's just plain text. I don't have any headings. I don't have any bulleted lists. I don't have any convenient page breaks or any of this. And so this is something that may deter you from a text file. And you've got a couple of options here. The first option is to write your file, save it as a text file on your Braille display, transfer it to your computer, either accept that it's plain text, and that is what it is, or you might want to copy all the text into something like Microsoft Word and then format it directly on your computer. And that's a completely valid option. And that's definitely an option that I have chosen at times. If let's say at work, if I'm having a meeting and I think, okay, it's an hour-long meeting, I'm only going to take a few brief notes, I might either keep those as a text file or I might transfer them into Word and do a bit of formatting on them. And it's only a 5-minute job. And so I think, well, do you know what? That was worth it. But what you could also do, and this is particularly useful for longer and more complex files, is use a system of writing called Markdown. Within Markdown, you can add certain characters which will then enable you to format that document. So it's a markup language. So the asterisk, which you might think of as a star, you'll use those for a bulleted list. Number sign, which you might think of as the hashtag sign, you can use to indicate the heading level. And then you can run that document through a converter and you can convert it to a well-formatted document. This is particularly useful if your document is lengthier and more complex. And the nice thing is that at least in many Braille codes, actually reading in Markdown, it renders quite well. So you can read it reasonably well in Braille without it being too bulky. Of course, this in itself is a bit of a generalization because we're all going to be using different Braille codes depending on the language we speak. But certainly, in several languages I've come across, you could read and write Markdown quite happily in Braille. And that is obviously a huge benefit. Some Braille displays will save a .docx file, and that's useful, if you're creating a formatted document on your display. And particularly in the case of note takers, you might even be able to run something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs directly on your Braille display itself. And then you can obviously create more complex documents within that system. Of course, when you're creating within Word or within Google Docs, you're going to come across the inherent limitations of both of these pieces of software. That's kind of a separate conversation to a limitation with creating documents on a Braille display. I would say the questions to really think about when you're creating content on your Braille display is, how much text am I going to write? If you're writing a really lengthy document, you're probably going to want to reduce the amount of cleanup time you're going to need afterwards. If you're writing a few brief notes, it's less of an issue. How complex is the document? And by this, I'm specifically talking about in the sense of formatting. Do you need headings? Do you need to apply lists? And do you need very nicely formatted paragraphs? Are you going to be adding citations or anything into your document? All of these are factors that would make you think about the kind of file format you want to create, specifically when you're creating a document on your Braille display itself. And then what do I want to do with the document? This really links into how complex it is, but I think there's another layer to this, and that is, are you sharing it with others? Are you creating a report that you need to share with your colleagues? Or are you creating a report that you're going to use yourself, that if it was beautifully formatted, that would be helpful, but it's not actually necessary because you're going to be the only person looking at it. And of course, that will have an impact as well, because if you're sharing a document with colleagues, you're probably going to prioritize it being well formatted, just because there's that element of you're giving it to another person and they need to be able to work from it as well. This is specifically looking about creating the document on your Braille display. When you actually transfer it to a PC, it's relatively easy depending on the document you created. If it's a text file, you can open this certainly in Notepad on your PC. If you have created a .docx, so a .docs, that would open in Microsoft Word. If you've created something within Google Docs, let's say you're using a note taker, then you would be able to either download that file, and certainly in Google Docs, you can actually download things as a Microsoft Word document as well. So that gives you other options in converting it. a slight word of caution I would give for any of these things is when you've written a document, whether it's in Word or Google Docs, and then you convert to another format, that can change some of the formatting within your document as well. But that would be the same even if you created your document on a PC. So it's something to be aware of, but I would say it's not a specific consideration for a Braille display either. If you're creating a document on a PC with your Braille display, of course, that's absolutely possible. You could use your Braille display as the input method for your PC. The one thing you really need to think about is the Braille input table here. So within your screen reader drives your Braille display. That's what basically makes your Braille display work with your computer and controls how your Braille display will behave. You should be able to select the Braille input table within your screen reader, and any of the big screen readers you absolutely can. And you've got a wide range of tables. So you might want to think about, okay, what am I creating? What kind of document am I making? And what Braille input table do I need to use? I, for example, use UEB, which stands for Unified English Braille. And I'm quite fortunate in that regard because within UEB, I can write on a Perkins style keyboard a selection of different symbols, such as the asterisk and the number sign and forward slashes and all this kind of thing. So I have lots of choice in the symbols I write. You may not be able to do that in another Braille input table. And so you need to think about what you're actually creating. But there's also the option of course, if you're using a QWERTY keyboard Braille display, then it really is just about what language your computer is set to as well, because that will obviously control how you're typing on your keyboard. So these are all completely possible, and just how much of a headache it's going to be is really going to depend on the device you have, but also the Braille table you're writing in, and then whether you're writing a file on the Braille display itself or on the PC. But one thing I would absolutely encourage you to do if you write a lot of documents, and particularly if you have a Braille display that can only create text files. James will be talking about BRFs, and so I haven't touched on those. They are a whole other thing that he will explain in more detail. But thinking of the sort of printed documents, if your Braille display just creates text files, as mine does, then I would really strongly encourage you to investigate Markdown because it will just give you a huge amount more flexibility. And there are times when you might think, oh, I'm not going to bother creating this just on my Braille display. I'll take my laptop with me because I need to make lists and all of this, and it's going to be really inconvenient. It doesn't have to be if you know something like Markdown. So that would always be my big tip for anyone who's creating content on their Braille display. Now, what about BRFs? Why would you write a BRF if it's not so easy to access on Windows? And what solutions are there to some of the complexities writing a BRF can bring up? But also, what are some of the benefits of that? Well, I think this is definitely a topic for James, who will talk to you about writing complex documents in Braille and the different kinds of files you might want to use.
Thank you very much, Connor. So I'm going right back to the start of what you said, choosing your file type. And another point which struck out to me is, are you sharing this with anybody else? So let's assume you want to make some notes, and the important decision, do I write it in text or do I write it in Braille? Well, I'm still using my Braille display either way, but is it going to be a text file, TXT, or is it going to be a Braille, BRF, BRL, BRA, depending on your country, etc.? What is the difference between the two, especially assuming I'm not going to share these notes with anybody else? Why would I want to create a text file? Why would I want to create a BRF or Braille file? What's the difference? The main difference really is your document translated into print and back again or not? So on my Braille display here, for example, I'm also using UEB, Unified English Braille. I'm also using the contracted version of the code, or grade 2, some people might call it. And if I type a word letter by letter and then press the space bar, all the contractions suddenly appear as if I typed all the contractions. The reason for that is internally the Braille display has taken the Braille keys that I've typed, translated it into print, stored it in the text file, and then showed it again in Braille. So it's translated it back from print to Braille. It's like a round trip. And it's really interesting that sometimes if you make a mistake or you don't quite to type the right characters, then you can get some very, very interesting results. I have had some words just completely disappear because I typed them wrong. And there wasn't a print equivalent for the dots that I'd written or the dots that the machine thought I'd written. And when it came back, there was nothing left. So, one real distinction between writing a print file or text file on your Braille display or a Braille file on your Braille display is it will be converted back to text and then back to Braille as you write. Now, not all Braille displays are the same, but this is the way the one I have works, and I'm fairly sure it's not unique. Another ramification, if you write text, you must use the official Braille code according to that Braille table that you have selected. So, for example, if I write, I don't know, a contraction which does not exist, the machine won't know what to do with it. If I want to use a contraction which doesn't officially exist, and yes, when I was at university, I made up several, mainly for speed. So I was writing things like SLN for solution. It's got far fewer letters, but it's not an official Braille contraction. Now, that one might survive as SLN, but some of the others probably wouldn't. If you choose to write a Braille file, you can write whatever dots you want, because the machine is not going to translate it backwards and forwards for you. It will just store the actual Braille presses that you want. Now, it does mean that if you just store Braille and then you suddenly decide later on, oh, I need to share this with a colleague, then you will need to translate it back into print. And there's a variety of ways to do that, including on your computer. Some Braille displays may give you the option to translate from Braille to text on the display itself. Otherwise, there's a whole variety of Braille translation programs that you can use on your computer. So, if you're using standard Braille code with no extras, no refinements or additions, and you want to share the document, perhaps, then choosing a text file is probably a good choice. However, if you want to use your own customized version of Braille, and there are a whole different ways we can do that, or you want perhaps to use a mix of Braille codes. Say I was writing a document which had both English and German, or Italian and French, or even the Braille music code. Don't try and give the Braille music code to a regular Braille text translator. It really will make a mess of it, and it certainly won't come out as music at the other end. So if you're doing anything like that, then it's a good idea to choose a Braille file. On my Braille display, I have to actually make that choice right up front. When I open a file, do I choose the editor program, which will let me write text files, or the Braille editor program, which lets me write Braille files? The other thing I was going to say about writing in Braille, and Oleg mentioned this earlier, is accuracy. I have discovered, this is just my personal experience, if you make a mistake in Braille, maybe you missed a dot, maybe you added a dot, maybe you didn't quite press all the dots together. One dot difference, in my opinion, is a lot more significant than one character difference when you're typing on a QWERTY keyboard. This is just my opinion here, that I find writing on a QWERTY keyboard can be more accurate, especially if you're not a very accurate Brailleist. So, for example, if you write in grade 2 or contracted Braille and you miss a dot, you could get a completely different letter, or worse still, you could get a completely different word. So, for example, L, the letter L might mean one thing. The letter K, one dot missing, is a whole completely different word. And when you come to proof that document later, if you just use a spell check or something like that, it might not pick up because it's still a word. And if you, for example, make a different contraction, which comes out with all sorts of interesting letters which don't belong in that word, and it's nothing like the original that you made, a spell check might not even be able to help you correct it. It might think, oh, I just don't know how to write, I don't know, BRWITH. I don't know how you approach what that's supposed to be at all. I've only added a couple of dots to what was originally a word. So choosing whether to start with a text file or a Braille file can be a really critical condition when you start. Think about, do I want to share this document? Do I need to use a mix of Braille codes? Do I want to use my own custom abbreviations, your custom contractions even? I am aware also that some countries don't use contractions, but I'm talking for those which do, like certainly in the UK and the English-speaking world, most people do use contractions.
Thank you very much, Connor. Thank you, James. It was very, very interesting about different kinds of files because, well, that's actually one thing we stumble upon very often, at least when I work with my colleagues. This is something really what can give a really huge headache to cooperation. One thing I would maybe add here, from the point of view, in a country where we don't use contractions, but we have other problems, mostly when we speak about print or text files type, because we have a lot of letters with diacritics, and then a code page or table of characters used in a Braille display and a computer may be different, and then you can choose a text file and believe that you will get a proper file in a notepad or Word, but it's not happening because there is a different code page in a Braille display set. So that's something also you have to consider when you are creating file in a Braille display. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments from our panelists?
I think most panelists are co-hosted, so you should be able to unmute yourself. I have spotted there is at least one panelist who's not a co-host, and I may have missed someone. So if you're in that position and you have comments and you're muted and you can't unmute, then pop up your hand and we'll deal with it.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So we will then move to another topic here, or other side of the problem of creating content on a Braille display. And we have our last speaker, Rainer Delgado, here. So we are speaking about Braille display as a device. What are the keys? What combinations you can press? Either you have Braille input or you have QWERTY input. Then we spoke about different file types. But let's have a look at the connection of Braille display and the device and creating content in your computer or your smartphone or whatever else. What's the most important there and what we should take care about?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. So we are talking about Braille tables. These were mentioned already sometimes during our sessions. And I just want to tell you a bit how to choose the Braille table and to decide what to choose. So I think some of us have learned at school to write on a Braille writing machine with 6 keys for 6 dots. And then when you first use the Braille display with Braille keyboard, you first had to enter 8-dot Braille, and it's of course a bit different from the 6-dot Braille. And you might have thought, oh, why can I not use the 6-dot Braille as I am used to use? And we had some examples where it comes to difficulties, as Michael just said. So in 6-dot Braille, you have to know exactly what you have to type to get the right thing in the normal text, which maybe sighted people want to read. But on the other hand, for some people, it's more convenient to write in 6-dot Braille. So you have these two decisions: 8-dot, computer Braille, and you can represent every sign with one dot combination, like even capital letters or numbers or whatever. Or you use 6-dot Braille of your language which you are using. And this is different if you are typing in English, in Slovak, or in German, or French, because you have in every language special letters which look quite different. And then there is contracted Braille in some languages, not in every language. In German, we have contracted Braille, in English, of course. And just before our meeting, I looked at NVDA, and there you can find the different Braille tables. And I was very surprised in which language contracted Braille is offered there. If it's accurate, I cannot decide because I don't know these languages. But you can have a look, and I will tell you where you find this. In German, you have another special case. There is this, I would call it full script. It's nearly unconstructed Braille, but you have only 8 constructions of some letter combinations. So we have, let's say, 3 grades of Braille in Germany. And you have options to select these Braille tables. And I want to start with the Windows Computer and JAWS. So there you can select this input mode that you want to use. And where do you do it? You go to the JAWS settings, and there you choose options. And inside the options menu, you choose Braille. And in this Braille menu of JAWS, there you have a button which means something like advanced. And there you find in the table of JAWS, of all JAWS settings, the Braille sections. And in this Braille sections, you go to General. It's the first sub-menu. And the first sub-menu of General is Translation. And in this translation, you can choose the language you are using for Braille at JAWS. And below the output and the input. And for input, you can choose the different tables that are offered for your language that you have chosen before. And then you can type with your Braille keyboard of your Braille display in this code that you have chosen. So contracted Braille, 8-dot or 6-dot Braille. So this is with JAWS. And then we come to NVDA. There you can also go to the options with NVDA key and N. Then you go to the settings. And there you choose the third section, which is Braille. And with Tab, you go to the input table. And there you have a very big list of different languages. And among the languages, different types. Like in German, you have basic 8-dot Braille, basic 6-dot Braille, and this full script. I just had a look. This contracted Braille in NVDA is not offered, but in other languages too, in English, for example, or French or other languages. There you find contracted Braille for languages that I have never heard before. So have a look at it. It's quite interesting, and I think it's quite probably that you find the Braille options of your language that you can use for the Braille input. And what I find by this way in NVDA, you can also, in this input tables, you can choose Unicode. And if you do this, you get Unicode Braille signs when you type Braille on your Braille display. So you have only this Unicode signs representing dots. So you don't have letters. Like if you press dot 1 and 5 for an E, you don't have an E, but you have this sign which shows dot 1 and 5. This can be interesting in the case that you don't want to write a script, so a language, but anything, just Braille dots. And it's interesting if you want to show a sighted person how a special thing looks in Braille, like a word. So I get sometimes questions, for example, from producers of medicine, and they ask me, how do we write this and that? And then I can write it to them in Unicode Braille signs, and they have exactly what I mean. Or if you want to write music, you can write music in Unicode Braille signs. Yeah, then we have iOS. Sorry, I cannot say anything about Android and TalkBack and Brailleback. Maybe Michael can add something later. But in iOS, with your iPhone, you can use the different options of Braille output with the letter G together with the space bar or the key 9. It's called in my display. I don't know if it's general. So if you have two space bars, it's the left space bar. So the letter G together with the left spacebar, and then you can jump from one output mode to the other. And how many output modes you have, this depends on what you have selected before in the menu of VoiceOver. So you can go to the settings of your iPhone, then choose, in German it's Bedienungshilfen. I don't know the English word. So the settings for this special aids, and there you find VoiceOver. Then you go into Braille and you can choose which Braille tables you want to use. And then with the letter G plus space, you can jump from one table to the other. And for the Braille input, you use the space bar together with the dots 2, 3, and 6. And then you also can jump from one input mode to the other. This is, I think, most convenient in comparison to the screen readers where you have to go into the menu. Here you can just use a shortcut to come to another input mode. And then you can jump very quickly from, let's say, from the contracted Braille of your language to the 8-dot Braille if needed. In the case of using a smartphone, I also want to say there are Bluetooth QWERTY keyboards that you can buy a QWERTY keyboard, which are not so expensive. And you can also type with a QWERTY keyboard connected via Bluetooth on your smartphone and use it in combination with Braille Display. And I do this sometimes, and it's a bit like to work on the computer for me. So it's a bit more convenient. It's not a Braille option, but it's another option of input with your device. So these are the points I wanted to present. And maybe, Michael, you can add something about the talkback.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Maybe I can add one information specifically about NVDA. You have mentioned that there is a long list of Braille tables to be used. And this is actually thanks to a library, digital library called LibLouis, as the name of the author of our script, beloved script. There in this library, every country can add or modify a Braille table to match the rules they are using actually in the country. Sometimes there are some changes in country's rules, so it can be mended in this LibLouis library. And what's very nice about this library is that usually a lot of devices and also screen readers are benefiting from this bunch of Braille tables collected in this library and are using this library to represent Braille. So that's why you can find a lot of languages there. About TalkBack, I don't actually know if it uses LibLouis or not, so maybe we can write this as a follow-up in a summary of our table talk. We have Matthew Horspool here with us behind the wheel. We can open the floor to questions.
So Alt-Y on Windows, Option-Y on the Mac. *9 if you're dialing in on a phone, although I don't think anybody is, or find the raise hand button on your smart device's screen, which is now usually on the main screen, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty finding that. But occasionally we find that people have a raise hand button under the More button, so you double tap on the More button and you should find it there. Or there may be a raise hand button under the Reactions button. While we wait for hands, we have had one contribution in the chat so far from Sandra, who says, "Hello, I think I missed the part where I could find out about Markdown. Is that something I can access from settings, or is it a code in its own right that I need to look up?" So that's what Sandra says. I don't know whether perhaps Connor might want to answer that.
Yeah, I can answer that. Markdown is in effect a sort of, well, I would describe it as a markup language. So it's just a way of writing. So it's not something you switch on in settings. Let's say if I was writing a text file and I wanted to start with a heading at level 1, and I would put a single number sign. So think of the hashtag sign and a space, and then I would type the text I wanted at heading level 1. And then when I converted that markdown file to, let's say, HTML, it would convert it with the correct styles in place. So essentially what I would recommend is that you look up the markdown commands and what they do, because it's just something that you can learn, and you can write it on a PC or you can write it in Braille.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question, hopefully.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. Sandra says yes, thanks. So that's worked out very well. We have a hand up, so we'll come to that very shortly. Just a comment from Svetlana, also in the chat, who says, "I use Unicode Braille from time to time to show people how Braille words look like. It's also useful when I'm trying to explain to users how to enter passwords on a Braille display. Usually I just type a couple of examples in Braille and paste them into emails. It helps much better than trying to clarify what dots to use for capitals, for instance." And yes, I completely agree with that use case. I've also done very similar with Unicode Braille.
Actually, Unicode Braille is a backbone of a new eBraille standard, so it's probable that it's going to be more and more used and popular.
Yeah, and I'd like to add here that I think as customers, we can really nudge manufacturers or Braille display developers to increase their support for Braille Unicode, because that really makes it so much easier to work with Braille files and to exchange Braille files, no matter what code page or what table you're using. Because now modern Braille displays will allow you to read Braille Unicodes, but you're not going to be able to do a search. So I have Braille Unicode file and I need to find something. So how do I enter that Braille Unicode into the search field? Quite frequently that's a problem. So I do hope Braille Unicode support is integrated on a better level into Braille displays, and we as customers can promote that.
We have the hand up, and I see that Mustafa has his hand raised. So we'll come to Mustafa now.
Hello. Thank you for this interesting, really information. First of all, I'm Mustafa. I'm talking to you from Madrid, Spain. I'd like just to share something about one more Braille format, just so that people here, if they sometime encounter that Braille format, so that they can recognize it. It's the .BRA format. Sometimes there's languages like Spanish and some regional languages here in Spain. We use .BRA format, not .BRF. So it's a format designed for Spanish and languages here in Spain. It's based on ASCII code. And it's in the Braille format where most of Braille books on computer are stored. Here, for example, there's a very big library of Braille books here in Spain made by ONCE, the Organization for Spanish Blind People here. So just to know that if someone is learning Spanish or has the curiosity to use his note taker in Spanish language, if you change the language of your note taker or Braille display, there's some Braille displays, as you mentioned before, with some standalone features, we know. But if we change it to Spanish language, we have support for .bra files.
In fact, BRA is the same as BRF. The name is because the Spanish word for file starts with the letter A. Is it archiva? Is that correct? And also you use the Spanish Braille encoding instead of, for example, an English Braille coding or a German encoding. So yeah, but yes, a good point.
And that's all. I only just wanted to, so that people, like, if you see it somewhere browsing the internet or something, so that you can, what is it, or to recognize it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mustafa. Actually, it's quite tricky to decipher sometimes. Either you have BRA or BRF, or, well, which translating tool to use. Mostly when I'm from Slovakia, where we have actually different tables, and I'm trying to bring to Slovakia some book from, I don't know, from library in Once or from England, and it's sometimes yeah, you just have to know what type of translating tool to use. There are some tools quite robust. There you can choose a type. For example, RoboBraille is a quite robust thing to use. But yeah, sometimes it takes a bit fiddling around what is the best solution. So do we have some other questions, Matthew?
We did have something from Svetlana, who says that she's already doing some advocacy around Unicode Braille, which is excellent. We've also actually had a question from George, and I think we can answer this. Hello. Unfortunately, I lost about 15 minutes plus of the session. Is there going to be a recording delivered somehow so that I can see the whole of it? And Michal, I believe livingbraille.eu is where people can get that. Do you want to talk a bit about Living Braille and the recording?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Of course, the recording is going to be shared with the people who registered. So if you received an email about this session, and if you received a link to connect with us, then you will receive an email with a link to a recording. It's going to be a YouTube video. Actually, in the video, there is just the logo of Living Braille, as we are with cameras off. But yeah, it's going to come quite soon to all the participants. I'm very glad that we have over 160 people registered to our sessions. It's a fantastic number. I would like to thank you all for expressing your interest in our table talk. And all these 160 people are going to receive the link to our recording. And of course, there are all 3 previous sessions recorded as well, and you can reach them through Living Braille or through our YouTube channel, Living Braille. Okay, so I will ask if there are still some questions. If you want to ask something, what we spoke about today, or if you have some questions to our previous sessions, now is the time to ask them. Raise your hand or write in a chat, please, and we can answer if we know.
I'm not seeing any hands raised just at the moment, but that I think is an important thing, isn't it? This is the final table talk in the current series, and we have intentionally left a little bit of extra time so that if there were questions that you had from earlier table talks that you weren't able to have answered, then feel free to ask. So anything that was discussed in any of the table talks, you're welcome to ask a question. So far, as I say, nothing really coming through, and that's fine. We can keep this open for a little bit longer. This is the end of the table talks, except it's not really the end of the table talks, is it? I don't know if we're in a position to really share what's coming next, but is it appropriate to maybe tell people that something is going to happen and perhaps where people can find information about when the next round of table talks, if there is going to be one, is going to be taking place?
Yeah, I suggest we turn this question to Rainer as our group leader, because yeah, we have some plans and you can share it with us, at least briefly.
Yeah, so the first thing is that the participants who are here can suggest topics we could discuss here, and we try to collect information and present. So this is the first point. But so our plan was to have 4 table talks, which we had now from January to April, and then make a summer break and start again maybe in September. And one idea that we have so far is, or came up by the question of one producer who asked us if they could present something today. And we said, we think about this topic of the day, we can talk ourselves and not refer to a special Braille Displays. But it would be very interesting to invite Braille Display producers to present their products, to ask them questions, and also to tell them what we like and what we don't like at their products. And this is what we want to do the next series of table talks, to invite producers and to talk with them about their products. And not only to get information from them, but also to tell them what we want.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So these are plans which are still not, in fact, complete, but we are going to try to bring you again some interesting content in autumn this year.
We had just a proposal from Svetlana. She says she would like to talk about multi-line Braille display. And yes, I think this is really an interesting thing. We had this in our Braille Working Group. We had a very skilled guest from UK. And maybe we can repeat this for everyone who's interested to talk about multi-line Braille displays. Is it worth to buy one, and what can they still not, and so on?
If we think of like current developments, a couple of days ago there was a press release about a new product from the UK called Canute Scientific. So Canute is not technically it is a multi-line Braille display. I mean, it's a self-contained device, but it would be nice to be able to like hear more about things like that. And I'm not a participant, I'm a panelist, but I think we'll try to keep our eyes open to devices that emerge on the market.
Absolutely. All these inputs are important for us. So keep posting them to team@livingbraille.eu. So TEAM at livingbraille.eu. That's our mail address where you can reach us, and we'll try to find really good schedule for all autumn sessions we can bring to you. Hopefully it will work out, and we will have also guests, interesting guests, manufacturers, or speakers about multi-line displays, or whatever you suggest. We will try to manage it. All registered participants, it means 160 people, are going to receive an email with this recording. And there you will also have an information that we are going to keep these email addresses to send you a link after we start a new series. Of course, you can write us anytime to just stop sending you emails, and we are not going to bother you anymore. But if you are interested in this topic, in a Braille displays, in using all the devices with Braille displays, Braille input, multi-lines, and so on, we are going to keep you posted with all our work related to this topic. With this, I would like to thank you all for coming to be with us for all 4 parts of our talk. Every time we met, it was very nice and full of information. Most of all, I would like to thank Matthew for his work with all these magic Zoom stuff. I'm really lost in that. So thank you, Matthew. Thank you for your input and experience every time we met. I would like to thank all panelists who visited all 4 sessions of our expert table talks. We had really a lot of interesting people here speaking about their experiences, and it was really full of information and very knowledgeable for myself, and I believe for our participants as well. So thank you very much, and I hope we will see each other somewhere in the autumn. We will let you know. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye to everyone.